schedule and the actual voting schedule and address and whatever, that's back there in case anybody needs it. One of our neighbors asked about, she came up with a whole list of questions regarding bonds, and there were some really good questions in there. So when I saw that, I went ahead and answered as many as I could. Then I referred it to the Gillies to look over my answers and answer the ones I couldn't answer. We do have some copies of that. All of that has also been on the internet. Everything's out there. But if you want to see what a copy of that, it's out there. Also, in case anybody, again, has not been on the internet, after the last meeting, I posted David's PowerPoint presentation on the internet, and it has all the information that we're going to be giving to you. But if anybody has not been able to get that, it's back there. All right. I think that does it. Oh, real quick. And this has nothing to do with the bond. We're going to have a free concert here in Ivanhoe the 10th of November, and this is awesome that the Southeast Texas Wind Symphony is going to come and give us a free concert, so please join us as a community. And next weekend we have an Arts and Crafts Festival. Come out and support our local artists. Okay, on to one of the first questions probably all of us have is, why have another bond election? We just had one in May and it lost. Why are we doing this again? One of the main things, and this is, we had an economic advisor come in, and this was through a grant, through it's Harvey related. There was communities that were affected by Harvey for economic recovery, and so we found out about this grant through VetCog. They got us connected with the people, and we got a free economic advisor to come down here. And I just want to read a couple excerpts from the preliminary report that she sent. The very first order of business for Mayor Kathy Bennett and City Secretary C.D. Woodrum was to take a tour of the community, traversing the many roads and seeing the city's assets and challenges. Distinctly, the city's roads are in dire need of imminent repair. Because we work in communities across the globe, we know that the severity of the crumbling infrastructure is comparable to what is experienced in some developing countries. That's how bad she saw our roads. And like I say, it's an international company. She came down from Indianapolis, Indiana, and they work all over the world. And that was her response, or her reaction. She also had a survey out there, and that was up there for a couple months for people to respond and what they liked and what they didn't like, and what they didn't like about Ivanhoe. This bar thing, it's up roads. It's almost a unanimous thing. What do I like and what do I don't like about Ivanhoe? The roads are number one. I get it. Under goals and strategies, she said, due to the terrible and abundant decay of roads in Ivanhoe, the top recommendation is to assemble funding to directly, swiftly, and sustainably repair the roads. Currently, City Council officials have scheduled a bond election for November 2018, and our firm strongly supports this effort. This is somebody that came in here and assessed us that had totally third party. The thing is, we see a need, as your city council, we see a need that we cannot meet in any other way. We have an entire budget of a little over $500,000 a year to support our 46 miles and our dams, and our 4 dams. It's an impossibility to be able to do what needs to be done on the money we have. So what we have to do is look, your council, voted to have this presented again. Because the other thing is, we felt like we didn't have enough time in May to really get the word out there, to really talk to people, to get them to understand what's going on and why we're doing this. So we voted to put it up again, and that's the reason, because we just see a need that cannot be filled in any other way. We have had the incidence of mail being suspended in our community because of the poor roads. I am not arguing that there are poor roads, but what do? With our budget and what we have going on, there's only so much that we can do. Yesterday, our public works coordinator told me, he says, you know where the crew is right now? A lady called who has a quadriplegic son, and her son literally bounced out of his chair in the car while they were leaving the community. So we take the road crew off of whatever they're doing, and we go and help that woman. And this is what we're having to do. We've got 4 guys out there trying to patch 46 mile roads and keep the roads open for all of us, and we just can't do it with what we have. We have to look at the fact that we have to reach out and do something bigger and better to serve our community. There's been some controversy about it, and it's like Jane said, I love your prayer, Jane, thank you. Yes, we have different opinions, and you know, I get it. Nobody wants more taxes. I don't. You know, none of us want to have to pay more, but what's the other solution? You know, if we sit here and do nothing, our roads are falling apart. Somebody said they've lived here for 25 years and the roads have never been worse. And it's like, okay, I looked a heck of a lot better 25 years ago. Everything wears out. Some of our roads are 50 years old, guys. You know, yes, they're worn out. We've only been able to patch. We have not been able to do anything proactive with our roads because there is not a budget. But the problem is now, especially after our major hurricane with the flooding we had, and then the subsequent flood in March, our roads have just, I think all of you have noticed an increased deterioration. I mean, you can see it by the day. It's just getting worse and worse, and if we don't do something, our roads are just going to totally crumble. And then where are we? I know that there's a lot of mistrust. They talk about where they don't trust us, especially not, there was one sent out yesterday. Do you trust your council with $2 billion? I don't, you know, but it's not billion, it's million, but would you trust your city council? You know, I get that question, because you know what? There's mistrust at every level of this country. I can honestly say I don't trust my elected officials a lot of times. So I get you. You know, you don't trust us because government is bad, politicians are bad, and you know what, guys, here in Ivanhoe, we're not politicians, we're volunteers. We've been volunteers for years and years. We're a new community, and we just switched over from being on the association board to coming over here you know, we're a small community. Now, I get and I understand people's reluctance to trust. How many of you feel that way? A lack of trust. It's okay. That's okay. What I would like people to do that really have a question about how this money is going to be utilized, first of all, it has to go into a separate account. It doesn't go into the general fund, and it's strictly audited. But I would like to have an audit committee of those people here in Ivanhoe that have their questions and have their doubts. Questions and doubts are good. And I would like them to sit on this audit committee, come in once a month and review what has been spent. When those bond funds are in that account, come on in and look at them. Review them. You know, let the community know what your opinion is of the way things are being spent. You know, it's all totally open. And I would like you to know that it's open. I have put a stack of my business cards back there on the table, and that's another handout. Please take one. I tell everybody my personal phone number. I am open to anybody coming in and sitting down with me. I will show you anything you want to know, if you want to see about what we're doing at every point in this city. Everything that we're doing is open. So please feel free to ask questions. Feel free to get in there and say, I'm not sure whether this is right or not. It's okay to protest. And the question, we have asked for solutions, for possible solutions. I mean, David Marshall went on. We don't usually interact much on Facebook because one of our problems as city council, we have to adhere to Open Records Act. And so if I put something, which I did, I put something on Facebook the first time just a few weeks ago. And what I did before I did that, I sent it to CD to look over to make sure that my answer was correct. And then I said, okay, you say that on our computer as our records of Facebook posts, because I felt I needed to do that. We have to be very careful, because I could put something out there on Facebook and somebody could delete it. Whoever's in charge of those sites can just delete your post. But we're required to have a record of everything that we, as city council members, put on Facebook. So somebody could come in 10 years from now and say, I want to see what Kathy Bennett put on Facebook such and such a date, and we are required by law to furnish that. Okay? I told David Harrington's been on back and forth on Facebook trying to clarify, and answer questions. He has done a beautiful job, and I told him, I said, make sure that everything you put out there, you keep a copy of, so that somebody else can come in and say, I want a copy of that, and we have it available to people. That's part of our obligation as far as public records are concerned, and that's the reason you haven't seen us on Facebook. Now, saying that, we have put out there, and David Marshall especially has put out there, come up with other alternatives. We don't see where there's any alternative. That's why we're here doing this. If somebody has a better idea, come up with it. Now, we did get, someone came up with the idea of buying the water system. And I commend somebody for coming up with an idea. I thought about that a long time ago, and I investigated whether we could buy it or not. Not to fix the roads, but just because we had such outrageous rates and poor service. And it's not a possibility. The Gillies back in January 2017 actually worked up some figures for me, and it would just be a financial impossibility to buy the system. And they have to be willing to sell it, and they're asking $8 million. There's no way you can do that. So, but the thing is, somebody came up with a thought. Would this work? Would this help? Now, another group has come up with something that's very disturbing about unincorporating. We incorporated in 2009 because there had been a lawsuit that required the association fees to go down to $6 a year. Okay? And that's what we currently pay. Everybody knows your association fees are $6 a year. Do you really think that $6 a year will support 46 miles of roads and 4 dams? Absolutely an impossibility. And the sad thing is, only half the people pay that. So we've got 6 times 4,000, $24,000 a year, and only half the people pay. So that'd be $12,000 a year to support this community. Now, the other thing that they say in here is that the IPO. Well, let's see. With Ivanhoe becoming a city and no longer a private community, and being under obvious fiscal and financial crisis, all of its administration would revert to Tyler County. That's where our commissioner comes in. He's going to come in, swoop down, and take over Ivanhoe and support it totally financially, and our problems will be solved forever. Yeah, yay, Mark. I'm so glad you're here. This was
that answer now or later?
When I saw this, I thought, oh my God, this is so, it's not, I don't think anybody intentionally makes a mistake like that. They're misinformed. So that's the reason I invited Commissioner Nash today. I had our County Judge, Jock Blanchette, the other day to just confirm for you that if we did unincorporate, we would not automatically be taken over by the county. Our roads would not be county roads just because we unincorporate. That doesn't happen. We'd be back to being a private community like we were before. Martin wrote me a wonderful letter. And this letter is in regards to our conversation concerning the roads in Ivanhoe. The Texas Transportation Code addresses the issue of a county assuming responsibility for roads within their subdivision. There is a method for this to happen. However, there are some issues with the process that make it just about impossible. The biggest hurdle is the roads would have to be upgraded to county specifications before the county could assume responsibility. Okay? I like his next line. If the residents of Ivanhoe could afford to upgrade all the roads, then they would really not need the county at all, would they? You're right, Mark. There would also have to be 2 public hearings and a vote by Commissioners Court. Now here's the zinger, and I hadn't really thought about this one. He says, please understand that the county road special tax is divided by the miles of road a precinct is responsible for. Do you get that? So what we pay into the county for road tax is divided up amongst our 4 precincts. He said adding another 40 plus miles of road to precinct 1, which is Martin's, would take money from the other precincts. I can assure you that the other 3 commissioners would not go along with their reduction in funds. So the thing is, guys, and I asked Martin to be here to verify my statements. I don't want to make false statements to you, and I know that you don't. Some of you don't trust me, but that's the way it is. Let's not go there. You know, they say the county deputies would resume full-time patrol in Ivanhoe, and that never happened. We have always paid our own way as far as having some law enforcement out here. We've always taken responsibility for that. So let's really think about, you know, what we're doing and realize that definitely is not an option. I think I'm about ready to sit down and shut up, because I think it's time for David to do his presentation. Like I say, we have made adjustments to that map, and I think you'll be impressed with his thinking. And I would like to turn it over to Councilman David Harrington.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett. And thanks to all of you for taking part in this meeting and coming out to get informed and to ask questions and to search out for more information so that you can make a decision based on the very latest and most up-to-date and complete information that you can get hold of. As the mayor mentioned, I went so far as this last week to get onto Facebook, onto one of the community watch site or a group, and literally beg for questions, for clarification, for people who had issues or concerns or questions or doubts or anything that they could pose so that I could answer those questions here in the meeting. And I've got a little list of those that I'll go through towards the end of the presentation. But again, thank you all for coming out. Really appreciate the support and the interest in your community. So key points, I'm just going to try and break this down quickly. Again, this presentation has been available on the city website. It's been tagged over onto Facebook. So what I'll do is I'll just go through each of these sections, section by section, and when I get to the end of it, I'll ask if there's any questions. And that's where you, as the audience, get to interact, and I hope that you will, because if there's no questions at all, that means that I'm doing way too good of a job at this. And hopefully I can be of some assistance here, because that's really all I want to do today, is to help folks get their questions answered. One thing I failed to mention is that we're being live streamed. It's on YouTube. I don't know anything about this, but thanks to Vance Townsend back there and his crew, this is being watched live out there. It's going to be on YouTube. We can become stars. But anyway, thank you, Vance, for bringing the technology up to where there were 80 people that watched it the other night. And this is awesome that you can watch it from home, because sometimes people don't want to come out to meetings, but this is opening up an opportunity for us that's incredible. And thank you to Vance Townsend and Ivanhoe Internet. Great job. All right, so we'll breeze quickly through voting rights. Who can vote in this bond election? Essentially anyone who claims residence in the city of Ivanhoe, Texas. This is per section 1.015 of the Texas Election Code, and is legally registered to vote in Tyler County 30 days previous to the election. That date has come and passed, but just for informational purposes, this includes, but may not be limited to, full-time resident homeowners, weekend part-time second homeowners, renters, and anyone with a permanent address within the city, such as students or deployed military staff. So and this plays back into the question of why are we having another bond election. I have to raise my hand, as I did last town hall meeting, and say I don't feel like I delivered enough information I didn't deliver clear enough information the first election go-round. And so there were questions as to who can vote, who can't vote. If you own a home here but you don't live here full-time, how do you establish residency? All these different questions. So I called the Texas Secretary of State and said, what's the deal? If you own a home here, can you claim residence here? And essentially they said, if you own a residence and you intend to return to it as your residence, it doesn't matter how much time you spend there, you can claim it as your residence and you can vote there. And so these were issues that even we as council didn't have the clearest understanding on, and we felt that it was important that the community understood what their rights were, and then as well that you were informed well enough. And like I said, I don't feel like I personally did a sufficient enough job last go around to get the word out, and all of the word out to everyone who needed it. So this is another opportunity, along with an augmented or adjusted plan and map, to get people all the information that they need so that we can have what we feel is the largest turnout possible with the most educated vote possible. The bond itself. A bond is essentially just a promissory note or a loan. It's how municipalities fund things essentially through credit. Sold by the city in the public or the private market and is repaid by property tax revenues. That's how bonds are backed. The bond election is simply a formal and legal vote by qualified and registered voters to give the city the authority, or deny it, the authority to issue and sell bonds. Even if the bond passes at the election this November, and this will get into some other questions that were raised, it doesn't mean that we have to sell the bonds. It just means that we have the authority as the city to issue and sell those bonds. So if for some reason a situation arose where financially it just didn't make any sense, if there was some global catastrophe and interest rates went through the ceiling, and we had to say, as a city, we can't put that on our taxpayers, we have the right as council to vote that down and say we can't do that. So the election only gives us the authority to issue and sell bonds. It's not actually what moves or sells the bonds. What can bond proceeds be used for? Strictly and only the purposes stated on the ballot in the ordinance. The funds, as the mayor mentioned, are kept in a separate audited account and are governed by state law. Back in May, and then I think there was a flyer that the mayor had in hand just a minute ago. Do you trust your council members with $2 million or $1 billion either way? This is not something that, these funds are not something that can just be used to go down to the grocery store or go on vacation or go buy a new Rolls Royce. These are strictly watched funds, and they can only be used for the purposes of road maintenance and repair and the required adjacent services like engineering, legal counsel involved in the bond process, the municipal advisors services to actually move the bonds and sell them in market. So only things that are directly related to supporting road improvement and maintenance are allowed as far as these funds are concerned. That's it. Strict legal guidelines. Will issuing and selling bonds raise my taxes? Absolutely yes. What happens is after the bond passes and bonds are sold, there is a debt service component that is added to the tax rate. So in this particular situation, it's estimated at around 27 cents per $100 of tax valuation on your house. And so when we come to budgeting time next year, when we come to setting the tax rate next year, or whenever the bonds actually are going to be sold, then we will, as council, vote to have that debt service increment added into the tax rate, and that is what actually supports repaying the bond. How much will my annual taxes increase? Bond repayment adds, again, approximately 27 cents per $100 of appraised property value annually. And this is based on a 4 to 5% interest rate on the bonds, because the bonds are a loan, just like when you take out a mortgage on your home or credit card debt or anything else like that. You have an interest rate that you're charged on those funds. And the budgetary figures that have been provided for us use an estimated 4 to 5% interest rate annually, and so that lands you at about 27 cents per $100. So for a home appraised at $100,000 on the tax roll, that's going to cost you roughly $270 per year. You can see the little table there. It breaks down what it looks like per month. Final figures, of course, will vary based on the bond rate and the term secured at the time of bond sale. All the estimates and budgetary figures that we're working with right now are forecasting a 4 to 5% interest rate on the bonds and a 20-year term. So, of course, none of the figures, whether we're talking about the cost that we'll look at here in a moment to actually service the roads, or the interest rates, none of that is set in stone until we get down to signing, papers, and we have bids in from contractors and bids in from investors who want to buy the bonds. So, as council and as public leadership, we do the very best that we can to get the numbers as close as possible to what they will actually be. And we call in on folks like Mr. Fox from a legal standpoint, our municipal advisors, the Gillies from Houston, LJA Engineering, and we lean on them to give us the best numbers possible. But those numbers will, without question, be in the range of where they are. So we have to wait and see what the actual final numbers land at. When will I see an increase in my taxes? Taxes will not increase until the bonds are actually sold. And they may be sold incrementally, depending on what happens as far as, and we'll get into, again, shortly hereafter, we're looking at some accompanying grant funding. Depending on what happens with that, we may not need to sell all the bonds at once. If we get a substantial amount of grant funds to match against the road bond monies, then we may not have to sell all the bonds at once. And we may do it in stages, whatever makes the most sense financially for the city and for the taxpayers is the route that we'll go. So it may not be a lump increase all at once. It may be over a couple of tax seasons. If bonds are not sold all at once, taxes will increase relative to the amount of bonds sold. When will the bonds be sold? First and foremost, not until we hear back on the application that we're putting in for grant monies relative to the Harvey disaster of last year. Glad that's done. There is a hazard and emergency mitigation grant that is available to us. We've already filed an intent to apply, and we were approved to be able to apply for the grant. It is a we'll talk about it more in a minute, but for us it's a very special opportunity as a city. Until we hear back on that, whether or not we're going to get any funding for that, we're not going to move forward with selling any of the bonds, because getting the grants are contingent upon us having access to bond funds. So we want to make sure that we find out if we're going to get any additional funds to match up first. Also, not until a qualified project is defined by the bond ordinance requires it. Current projection for first bond sale, we're looking at probably somewhere September, October of 2019. Road work typically happens between about April and September in the seasons, because you have to have hot weather to lay down your asphalt and your tar, your different top coat applications. And we have to match that with the end of our fiscal year and setting our budgets, which happens in September, October. So that being said, that pushes probably the first increase that you would see in your taxes to, I think, 2020 or so. You know what? I haven't stopped to ask anyone for questions. Is there anything so far that anybody has any questions on? Yes, sir. Can you come up to the microphone so that we can get it on the live stream?
I'm Danny Busby, live on Sherwood Forest Drive North.
Yes, sir.
My question is there, what would the city have? You say 4 to 5%. How far would y'all be willing to go up if it increases the rate of interest?
So that, very good question. Thank you for bringing that. This was a question that you brought up on Facebook and fielded to me. Lance Fox is our legal counsel, and I talked to him about that this morning. There is a cap. I'm not sure. He couldn't pull it right off the top of his head. What the actual cap is that's set for that. It basically, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Lance, does it boil down to the statutes for usury limits?
Yes, there's limits under Texas law on what the maximum interest rate city debt can be. I've been doing this about 30 plus years. The good news is rates have been low ever since I've been practicing, so it's never really even come close to the cap. It's somewhere in the 15% range. I'll get the answer for you on Monday and send it back. But like I was telling you this morning, the financial advisor's job and the city council's job is to decide and go into the market, is this the best time based on what interest rates are at that time. They do vary, but they have not varied really in the last 20 years more than about 2%. They went down historically low about 5 years ago. They crept up a little bit. The 4 to 5% rate that your financial advisor is projecting is a pretty conservative rate even in today's market. It's based on the market, the city's credit rating, your tax base, and all these things. But it's a political decision. So if rates shot up, say, to 10% at the time you were ready to go into the market, the city council would decide at that time, when we told the voters it was 4 to 5%, are we going to still go into the market? They would probably call a community meeting, but they would have that authority. So, you know, it's within whatever the bounds of the law will allow, and politically what the city council would be willing to do at that point in time.
That's good. Even if it went to 10%, that would double what we're going to have to pay in taxes.
Correct.
That's my question, is
absolutely.
how high are y'all willing to go?
Well, and it's a very good question, and it's a question that technically can't really be answered at this meeting. It'll wind up being a council decision that would have to be on the agenda. It would, in my mind, it would take an immense amount of scrutiny to understand what the implications were. Now, to say that interest rates, and I'm going to try not to get out into the weeds too far here, but if your interest rates doubled, and say that we got a significant amount of funding for grants, and I'm just speaking off the cuff here. If we only had to use half as much bond funding because we had excellent grant funding matching, maybe we could get away with selling half the bonds at twice the rate. I don't know. But I don't foresee us, and again, there's not a vote going on here or anything, so we can't say. But I did talk to our financial advisors this morning. What they said was they sold a 15-year term loan just recently for 3.3%. And if it had been a 20-year, they say that it probably would have been 3.5 to 3.75%. There was a question raised on Facebook, being that we're a young city, our credit and our bond rating may not be exceptional. Still, we're talking maybe about a 0.5% difference. That's what they're estimating. So they tried to go conservative because they know that it's a tough economy, it's a tough market. We will go out first and foremost to public bids so that we get competitive bids, and we'll get as many as we can bring in at once and then review those. If we don't find something that we feel is satisfactory, and in my mind, look, I see you guys on the streets. I'm a general contractor around here. You're my family, you're my neighbors, my customers. It's in my interest to try and to deliver on my word everything that I say. And if I'm presenting to you that we're budgeting 4 to 5% and numbers come in at 7 to 8%, you better believe I'm going to do everything I can to find a way to work towards that 4 to 5% that I've put forward. Because I plan on being here in Ivanhoe the rest of my life, and I like keeping good neighbors. So I'm going to be working personally in the community's best interest. So there will be a public bid that's put out. We'll see what we can get from that. If we don't find something that we feel fits our financial needs, then we'll go and start looking at private placement or direct placement offers. And if we need to even go back, I talked to the financial advisors this morning, if we need to go back to a second round of public bids, you know, like Mr. Fox mentioned, sometimes you have a dip in the economy and they push, you know, interest rates up. Sometimes that levels out. It's, you know, completely within the scope of our capability to go back for a second public bid and see if we can get a better offer. So the real answer is I can't tell you how far we'll go. I don't believe that anybody on this council is going to support something that is radically out of line or that doesn't serve the needs of the community as well as possible. But at the end of the day, that decision is made in an open council setting, and it is voted on by council in the presence of the community. So people will be well advised on where it's at.
I understand. Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question.
Hi, I'm Chris Katanga. I live at 295 Sherwood Forest Drive North. My question comes in, you said that the levels is going to be presented in front of an open forum with the city council for a vote. The question comes in is, so we won't purchase the bond until after we have another city council meeting to be presented in front of the community.
I'm not super clear on your question. Let me see if I can answer it, though. What we'll do is we'll go out. We got Scratchy. Is that one? Okay, I'll try and hold up to it. We'll go out for a public bid, called a competitive bid. Hopes are that we get 5, 6, 7 investors that would like to come and purchase the bonds for us. Now, it gets very dangerous to throw strange figures out, like saying that the interest rate doubles. Radically unlikely. The Fed only, even increases things at about 1/4 of a point at a time. Maybe across a year, 0.5%, something like that. So the notion of thinking that interest rates would double to 10% in the year and a half that we're talking about, radically unlikely. And I think that all kind of came into question with some comments being made about some 22% that people could charge, or even the 15% that Mr. Fox mentioned. What will happen is we will receive the bids. They will be gone over in public at council meeting. It'll all be open meeting. Everybody will have the right and the availability to be here. I assure you it will be a heavily publicized event. And then from there, we'll have to come back after review and decide whether or not we want to accept any of those bids, if any of the interest rates are low enough, if any of the terms are reasonable enough for us to move forward. So, did that make...
Any comment?
No, that's exactly right. It'll definitely be a public meeting. It takes city council action and the opportunity for the community to talk just like they do on anything that's voted. The competitive bid process will assure you that you're getting the best rate that's in the market, and you're going to find that all the bids are fairly close because there's a market out there to buy public debt. The same financial advisors that are helping you sell it are helping their clients buy the public debt throughout the state of Texas, really throughout the nation. And so they're going to know going into kind of what the market range is within that time frame. And so just not for the city, but the market rates and generally have gone up, the financial advisor may tell the city, this is not the time to go on the market. Let's let things calm down a little bit if there was some radical event. I've never seen it happen, even after 9/11 and some of these other events. The rates have historically stayed low. They can go a point, maybe 2 points. That's even rare. Remember, it doesn't affect just the city. It affects the U.S. economy and the U.S. government and what it costs them to borrow the money. So the Fed does control, to some degree, the interest rates, and they've got an incentive to keep them low. But at the end of the day, it is the market driving it.
Right. I understand that the Fed's raised the interest a couple times this year. That's the reason I'm asking that question.
Right.
About it being public.
Right, and they're going up like 1/4%.
Right.
And so all these do tie together. The Fed lending rate's different than your lending rate, but from an investor standpoint, it all ties together. What's the stock market doing? What's the cost of borrowing? What's the public market? And so on. And so they do all tend to tie together. But your financial advisor in your city will be well informed based on where we're at right now. And if we go in the market in the next 6 weeks or so, you can anticipate it's going to be this, and then if it takes a big turn for the south, they're going to tell you, wait, some chaotic event happened. If there's another, God forbid, 911 or something that sent the market in chaos, everybody would just, hold it until things settle back down.
If there's another 911, you won't see me at the next council meeting. I just came back off of duty. So the sequencing is, we're gonna have the vote. If the interest rate is 4 to 5%, we'll make the decision with the roads. Or we'll implement the road project.
Right, council will review the bids that we receive, and depending on what we get back in, we'll either accept the bid and then move forward with securing construction. Well, at that point, we'll already have contractors lined up because we'll have bids and everything. But we'll move forward with the sale of the bonds, and then it'll go from there. But, and remember, an important element to remember here is when we go out for competitive bid, this is in the public marketplace. And so we're not just going out to look for somebody to service our loan, we're also their customer, because they're looking for investments, and they've got other banks and other investors that they're vying against. They want our debt, because that's how they make money, is they charge us interest. And so it's in their best interest, no pun intended, to give us a competitive rate. And that's why we go to public bid that way, is so that we get the best possible rates, because they're competing against other investors as well. And that's why we're even able to go to a financial advisor and say, what's the average rate right now? What are we seeing in the market? Because that's what the investors are willing to give, and that's about what everybody's competing at.
Well, the reason I was asking about sequencing too is looking at Chanticleer Road is a great example of it. Since we have a sandy base on the road construction, I do construction my surveying job. So I work inside of a chemical plant and I manage projects. Actually, I manage project managers. But those projects and designs, the current construction of the road right now, by patching it, we have the sandy base. Every time we get a flooding event, the silt washes out, and in turn the asphalt collapses. It's just a repetitive cycle. And the sequencing question came into play because of the drawings, the publicized option to review the drawings on the drainage and the style, the compaction ratios, and the soil testing for the project itself, whether or not that would be available for review and sequencing.
I would think, Mayor, I would think, of course, in being that we're under open meetings, that any information that comes in from our engineering firm on the road design or anything will all be public information that anybody could come up and review and take a look at any time that they wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, city government requires complete transparency, and we support that. So anytime anybody wants to know anything, financial or strategy or anything, come on up and ask. If we've got the information available, we're happy to share it. Because
Okay.
we love folks that are interested.
All right, thanks.
Sir.
My name is Derek Gibbs. I'm at 736 Sherwood Forest. I guess my question deals with any change in assessed valuation on a whole 5 to 10 years down the road. What are the implications there if the value of all the property here collectively gets higher or lower? What does that do to our, I guess, obligation of this debt over a 20-year period?
So the question is if property values increase over the term of the bonds, up or down, how does that impact the rates that are committed towards the bond? So the debt service component of the tax rate, and we don't have our financial advisors here. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm pretty good with spreadsheets and math, but if we have a debt that requires a specific debt service component, I would say that is going to remain the same. So if you have a dwindling tax base, which I don't foresee that happening, then the rest of your taxes may be reduced, but that component will have to stay the same. Now, that doesn't change what the tax rate may be, just because your property value changes, unless, of course, property values appreciate. Because as property values appreciate, in order to keep the same level of tax revenues coming in, we have what's called the effective rate, which every year you can't have more than 8% increase in revenue over the previous year. So if you see a 10% increase in overall property values, that 2% span there winds up being tax relief for the residents. So over a 20-year time span, as roads improve and property values increase, what we'll wind up seeing, hopefully, and that's part of the intent of the project, is that the tax burden on homeowners and property owners is actually reduced, because there's more homes, more improvements, more construction to actually share the tax load.
Okay, thank you.
one more quick question. Is that a... One more question, and I'll be through with you.
Go ahead.
Is that going to be a fixed rate? That's probably for Mr. Fox. Is that a fixed rate that you sell the bond at? Is there any way that it would balloon further on down the line? Could they raise that rate?
It is a fixed rate. It's legally permissible to sell variable rate, but that's rare. This city would never do that, so that rate will be locked in at the time of sale. Yes, it'll be a fixed rate.
I'm going to shift back to this one.
All right, let's see if we can rip through some more of this. The grant. Okay, so grants are monies that are given to the city that don't have to be repaid. You know, in essence, it's free money because you need it. They can only be used for very specific purposes as specified in the application. The Harvey grant, specifically, is focused around hazard and emergency mitigation. For this reason, the drainage in our community, the roadways, egress and ingress, how we get in and out during emergencies is critical to mitigating hazards and emergency situations for us, and that's why we qualify to actually apply for this grant. City roads provide emergency access and exits, so that puts us in contention for these grants. The situation with grant monies is the vast majority of the time, the only way to qualify or to actually win a grant is to be able to be in a low to moderate income position, which means the better your community is doing, the less chance you have of getting grant funding, which is what we've come up against year after year after year. It's multiple years trying to get half of Durwood paved, and every time that you win a grant, which those are typically community development block grants, which are capped at about $300,000. When you win, you actually have points taken away from you the next time that you apply. So this grant provides a significant opportunity for us because we get to actually apply to have all of the city roads improved. And that's what our intent is. When we submitted our intent to apply, every single road in Ivanhoe was listed. Every mile, every foot, because we're allowed to put in for it. Now, whether we get all of that or not, we have no way to tell. We'll have to see how things pan out, and that's why we're going to wait before we sell bonds, is because ultimately this grant is a 25-75 reimbursement style grant, which means the city puts in 25%. Well, excuse me, the city first puts in 100%, and then the grant gives us back or refunds us 75%. So it only kicks in after we've spent the money. But in this situation, if we have $2 million in road bond funding available, that means we get to multiply that by 4. 25% out of 100%. You get an extra $6 million potentially of grant funding. That is blue sky. That's the very best case scenario, and that would pay to repay virtually every road in Ivanhoe. So as an example, if the city spent $1 million of bond funds, then the city would send proof of the work and payment of the work to the grant oversight group, and then the grant fund would reimburse the city $750,000. And you just continue that cycle until you're out of funding. In this particular case, like I said, $2 million gets us about $8 million worth of potential improvements if we had the best case scenario. Really important to understand that without bond approval, the city cannot apply for this grant. And this is a rare grant opportunity. It's not something that's always available. This is strictly following the Harvey disaster last year. It's the only reason that this is even available to us. So unless you have access to funds available when you submit your application for the grant, you get disqualified. So we have to have essentially money on the table before we can go after these grant funds. Very briefly, I'm not going to go through a bunch of this. It's available online. It's available in the packet. You look up here, these are some of the cost components involved in redoing a mile of road. You've got 3 different situations here, whether it's repaving previously paved or repaving previously unpaved roads at different widths. But you can see at the top end, $262,000 That's for a mile of road, and that's doing it the way that we're budgeting for these projects relative to the road bond, and that's to build 20-year roads. That's more than our total annual budget for road work. So we got 26 currently miles of roads. That's 23. No, paved roads.
Oh, 23.
Yeah, 23 miles of currently paved roads. Just to get those redone, you're talking better than 23 years of all of our budget. So you can understand trying to make any sizable difference is very difficult on the funding that we have. So, down to the meat and potatoes, the proposed map and street selection. I'm going to go through these and give some of the logic and the reasoning behind why these streets were selected. First of all, we've got Ivanhoe Drive. This is the main drive coming in from the gate all the way down to Charmaine Drive East down here at Candy Cane Park. This is the primary corridor for the entire city. Everything breaks off of that. So clearly that for emergency, evacuation, general travel, it's a core requirement for us to look after. Charmaine Drive East, and that's from Ivanhoe Drive down there at Candy Cane, down here at Camelot. This one was selected specifically because if we're talking about emergency management and emergency response, the community center is our emergency response center. It's also where City Hall is. We need to be able to get first responders in and out of here. Right now, this is an old and failing section of road. We want to make sure that we have a direct corridor all the way down to our emergency response center here. Chanticleer breaking off of Ivanhoe Drive all the way down to Lakewood. This is a relatively short section of street, but it connects Ivanhoe Drive to the secondary primary roadway in Ivanhoe, which is Lakewood. Essentially, probably about 2/3 or more of the city comes down Ivanhoe Drive and turns right on Chanticleer to go around the backside over Tristan and Galahad, going all the way back to Camelot. It's likely one of the most traveled stretches of street in Ivanhoe, so it funnels an immense amount of traffic. Same is true with Lakewood from Chanticleer. Maps coming. I just want to go through road by road and give an explanation of why each segment was done, and then we can talk through it all on the screen and you can see the nice colors and dots. Lakewood from Chanticleer. Thank you. All the way back to 26th Street, back at Camelot. That section of road pretty well is the primary pipeline for everybody back off of 27th, everybody around Galahad and Tristan, the whole 9 yards. It services such a bulk of our city traffic that it's impossible not to look at it as a primary corridor. Very close. Charmaine Drive South, zigzagging around Robert Burns and Ivanhoe Drive East, connecting back here at Galahad Dam. This is essentially, okay, I'll go ahead and do the map you guys want.
Right, because they don't know this stuff.
All right.
I'm giving it my Get out of the way.
All right, we'll just talk right through it. So, Ivanhoe Drive from Highway 69 all the way down to Candy Cane Park here and over to Charmaine Drive East. Right here we're at the community center, our emergency response center. This is where just about, you can see the pathway where Chanticleer breaks off at Lakewood and comes all the way to the back. That funnels from here all the way around through this area, a good 2/3 of the city. So Lakewood and Chanticleer primary pathway. We looked at the north side over here of the center section of the city, and all the way back up to Sir Jim. Proposal is to do 27th Street all the way to the north end, back to the ranch. There's somewhere, in all the red dots in here, this is estimated rooftop count. So this is essentially population density, the red dots. And you can see there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 homes back here. So really there needed to be a primary collector for people to, at least, if things get hairy and we're looking at emergency situations,
have a main pipeline to get from back here and get all the way out to good roads and then get out to safety if need be. Charmaine Drive South, over to Sir Robert Burns and Ivanhoe Estates here. This was a very specific reason. The very first place that we see flooding and road closures is right here at Tristan Dam. When water gets high, this is the first place that shuts down. And when that happens, there's no way for this entire side of the city to go except back around this way and across Charmaine Dam to get out. And so this becomes pretty crucial because you have to have a secondary emergency exit to get out the backside when you come around. Now, a question has been raised by more than one person, and it's outside the scope of the bond, the road bond. It is being discussed by council. What are we going to do about that situation when Charmaine floods, when Charmaine Dam is covered with water as well? Then you got Tristan down. By that time, you've got Tristan down, Galahad down, and Charmaine down. Yes, it is definitely an issue. It is something that's on the table that we're trying to generate ideas about what the solutions could be, but it'll definitely be a future engineering project. At this point in time, with the road bond funding, our intent is to make sure that at the very least, when this goes down over here, we at least have a secondary way to push traffic back around this way so that folks can get out clean around the south side. So you can see 27th Street is a new addition to the map since May. That was not on there previously, and that feeds and supports the north end of town. You'll see up here in the front, and by the way, it's the blue lines that are the proposed roads. Sorry I left that out. You'll see quite a bit going on up here in the northeast corner of town. Ivanhoe Drive, east and west, Sir Cedric, Gawain, and the cross streets of Saxon, Merlin, and Tristan. And the reason that we looked at these streets specifically were that area has historically had some of the least road infrastructure, worst drainage, and really some of the thickest population density when you look at it. So we wanted to make sure that folks in that area, number one, had a way to get out when times got tough and we had emergency situations. But we also needed to make sure that we were looking at areas that are going to continually cause problems with drainage. And by looking at these cross streets through here, we can look at starting to properly funnel and channel some of those waters, because really, anywhere where you've got a lake, you've got a bowl. And those areas need some serious assistance with the drainage. And part of the components that we're looking at with the cost of improving these roads is an estimated roughly $60,000 per mile of drainage improvements. So it doesn't make really good sense to put in a new road that has drainage issues that are going to erode it or destroy it. And so part of our strategy is to make sure that we're going to work on those drainage areas as well. But up here, new infrastructure for an area that historically has been just completely sand and clay, and improved emergency ingress and egress there. So, looking at the, again, I'm not going to go through this, but it is available for you to peruse. These are the engineering budgetary estimates for each of those sections of roadway as provided by LJA Engineering. The earlier sheet that you saw with cost components, that's just the baseline that we're working from. The figures that you see here, some of them will be lower. Some of them will be a little bit higher. It depends on when the engineering firm went out and looked at the roads. Some areas needed base work, some areas didn't need base work. So if you look at a mile of road, maybe 30% of it needed to be milled and to have base work done. Maybe 60% of it did. So the numbers are going to vary slightly, but what it boils down to is that the total estimate you gave me a shoddy laser, Mayor. $1.75 million is what the budgetary figure is, and that's for 7.6 miles of road. The question was asked last town hall meeting, what's going to happen with the other $250,000? Well, if you've ever done anything in budgeting, and I assume that since all of you live somewhere and have a home and buy groceries and pay bills and stuff you have, if you budget down to the very last penny, if anything pops up that you weren't accounting for, you find yourself in a bad spot. And so, talking with the engineers, they may estimate that 30% of a mile of road needs to have base work done, but when they get out there and they start working, and the fact that we're probably a year and a half out from starting, it may wind up being that it needs 50% base rehab. And so those are additional costs. Ultimately, we want to be able to provide this entire map. And if we don't leave ourselves any buffer, then we're going to wind up either having to take away from those roads or not be able to do them properly. In my mind, neither of those options are okay with me. So you have to leave a little bit of contingency space, and that's where that $250,000 comes in. Now, if we don't need that $250,000 to cover this map, that means that we can look at doing other roads or improving other drainage areas or taking on other road-related and improvement projects. Again, it can't be spent for anything other than road improvement. That's just the bottom line. So that $250,000 difference between the 1.75 budgetary figure here and the $2 million bond figure, that's our contingency spread, so that we can make sure that we can make good on this project. So finally, we look at really what are the potential outcomes. Blue sky, best case scenario, the bond passes and grant funds are secure. We get to use the bond funds to complete what's proposed on the map, and then we get to use grant funding to upgrade and recondition as many additional roads as grant funds provide for. And then beyond that, we get to use our existing road maintenance budget to maintain and improve the remaining roads. Second option, the bond passes, but we don't receive any grant funding. Worst case scenario here, we still do everything that's on the map, and then we continue to use our road maintenance budget to maintain the remaining roads. And the monies that we were spending patching potholes with labor and material, that all gets kicked over to the remaining roads so that we can take better care of them. That puts more budgetary funds towards the roads that are left over. Because if you got brand new 20-year roads, you don't have to maintain those. Worst case, the bond doesn't pass, and we're exactly where we are right now. And we just continue maintenance with our existing restricted budget. We attempt to grow the Public Works Department as budget allows, and ultimately, this is kind of a doom and gloom scenario, but because we've watched over the past several years, ultimately, all the paved roads out here would essentially turn back into dirt and gravel over a long enough timeline. You know, we've got areas like Chanticleer, like Charmaine South, where you can see the roads are crumbling on a daily basis, and you can watch it. That's what's going to happen, is they'll turn back to gravel, and they'll eventually have to go in and just be ground up, and it'll be dirt roads again. Now, I made a promise on Facebook. I intend to hold to it. There were some questions asked, and I said that I would voice them in public, and a couple more that the mayor threw my way. If passed, will funds that have been being used for road repair of those roads now go back into back road maintenance on other roads? Yes. If we fix a mile of road, we no longer have to use funds for that. We can shift it over to another road. What is the thickness of the road? As far as the overall road, I can't speak to that. I think that the real question being asked is, what is the top layer going to be? And, oh, sorry, I was already there. I apologize. The budgetary figures that we're using call out a 2-inch ACP overlay, so that's 2-inch asphalt top coat. That's what we'll be looking at for all the primary roadways. Looking at 27th Street
and the Ivanhoe Drive East and West, as well as the side streets up there. The proposal is for, and it's in the presentation as well, under the repair recommendation section. So if you guys have, get hold of that, you can see it. Those roads, we're looking at doing a 2-course chip seal top coat, and we talked. I think Councilman Pretty lives back on Galahad Loop. He says he's been here 25 years with the chip seal road, and it's one of the better roads out here. So with a 2-course chip seal, and again, talking to our engineer, we're confident that we can get the life that we need out of those. Total road length, 7.6 miles. What is the anticipated road life of these improvements? We had our engineer here, Alan Sims from LJA Engineering, the last town hall meeting. He stated that the engineering efforts towards these projects are with the intent to deliver us 20-plus year roads. So 20 years or better, and that's hopefully coming out with something that looks more like Camelot or Ivanhoe Drive at the end of 20 years, not something that looks like Charmaine Drive South at the end of 20 years. He's saying, of course, over the 20-year lifespan, you're going to get wear and tear, you're going to get damage from, car accidents or strange events, and you have to maintain that. But ultimately, they're supposed to last for 20 years. I've just got a couple more here. Cap on interest rates, we touched base. How many council members live on roads that are being improved? Mr. Morse right here is the only person who lives directly on one of the roads. Now, we all live in Ivanhoe, so we all are going to drive over some percentage of new roads, so you can see that however you want to. But he's the only guy who's lucky enough to have it pull right up to his house. I'll ask this question because I said I would. It was noted on Facebook, really looking directly at Councilman Morris here, that if a council person is in line to receive some sort of benefit from a vote, that they should recuse themselves. And really, Lance, is there? I'm going to lean on our legal counsel here. The statement was made that because Councilman Morris could see improved property values because he does happen to live on one of the roads that's being proposed, is there a need for him to recuse himself? And I think that the notion may have actually been relative to the voting process that council may have laid out. But in a general election, he has every right to vote. Is that not correct?
Sure. Well, there was a vote to call for the election. That vote's been made. There's not a legal conflict of interest there. Y'all live in a community. You could have a difference of opinion on it, but that vote's been taken.
Yeah, we all would have had to recuse ourselves on that vote.
and then everybody that's an eligible resident, registered voter is eligible to vote in the bond election. You're assuming he's voting for it, but that's a private decision.
Sure.
So, but he's not legally required to recuse himself.
So from our legal counsel, Lance Fox, there's no legal reason that any council member should not be able to vote in this election as its general election.
The example would be if the council member had the road contract or the engineering contract or was a member of our law firm where he's benefiting from the work and the services that get awarded from this, that would be a conflict that you would recuse.
So general property value improvement in his area of the community is not something that would justify him having to
Not
recuse
legally
himself.
conflict, no.
Not legally. Okay.
One comment. Just one comment. We voted on this with the bond election on in August. We didn't decide which roads were going to be on there in September. So at the time when I voted, put this on the bond on the election, I didn't know my road was going to be on there. Although I'm glad it is, I didn't have choice on that at the time.
I believe that's all the questions that I received on Facebook. Mr. Lance, have we had any streaming questions come in?
No, nothing come in today.
Nothing else there.
I'd like to say
Audience opportunity. Please, if you'll step up to the podium, name and address, and question and/or comment.
I'm David Kent. I live at 1026 Ivanhoe Drive. I'm David Kent, 1026 Ivanhoe Drive. I moved here about 4 years ago from a community 10 or 15 miles south of here, HOA. There's a lot of mistrust there in that community. And I think it was deserving, because when they would ask for money, and it would be for a capital fund, such as roads, bridges, whatever, they took that money and used it for other purposes in a few cases. And they asked for more money, and we asked for it to be specifically what they said it was going to be for, roads, bridges, and they told us to pound sand. And they would not commit. And they were talking about about the same kind of money. It's $50 a month increase for everybody. So I mean, when you get that kind of response, it's very enlightening to come down here and see some light. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is not for y'all. This is for y'all. I'm Valerie Weber from Galahad Loop. If you've seen the science fiction films of the 50s or the Jetsons of the 60s, you might believe we would all have flying cars by now. We don't, except for Bill Adney maybe. But in any case, we are still grounded to the earth for our daily transportation on roads. Roads are the lifeline of Ivanhoe. We love Ivanhoe because we are away from the big city, on land that's closer to nature. Unfortunately, nature in our daily use of the roads is conspiring to demolish our roads. With every heavy rainfall, more road materials washed away, potholes appear or reappear. City's budget cannot keep up with the maintenance needed to withstand the forces of nature in daily use. We need improved roads and better drainage so that the roads aren't washed away. This bond will provide both drainage and surface for those core roads, and every Ivanhoe road, if we are awarded all the grants. Our roads will return to Mother Earth if we don't act soon. It is only a matter of time. Some of us aren't getting mail because the road is too rough for the mail service. That's certainly inconvenient, but what about the time when the school buses refuse to pick up children? What about the time when the medical service transportation refuses to go onto parts of Ivanhoe to take people for medical appointments? Even if they have cancer treatments, they can't get there because the service can't get to their house or refuses to get to their house. Well, what if it takes those first responders several additional minutes to get to a home? Those are life-threatening minutes in some cases. Heck, what if our friends and family won't come visit? Oh, I don't want to go. Your roads are awful, Ivanhoe is nicknamed the land of lakes. We do not all use the lakes, but I guarantee you we use the roads. This may be a vote on road bonds, but in reality, it's a vote for the survival of our community. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else interested in questions? Or comments?
I can't resist.
I know.
I'm Lloyd Omsberg. I live on 3 Sherwood Forest Drive. I just heard it today, and I didn't realize that it was $60,000 a mile for drainage. I thought it was $60,000 for each section. So that's a lot more money, and I was glad to hear that. I didn't know that. But this is just my own personal opinion, because I happen to live on the same street as the mayor. So our street isn't going to get worked on. That doesn't bother me. I'm still in favor of this bond issue, because I come down Ivanhoe Drive, I go down Chanticleer, and I go down Lakewood. So I get 3/4 of the way home now, at least, if these roads are repaired. And my taxes are going to go up $320. One thing I'll say about that is my taxes have gone up every year that I've been here. And sometimes it was a lot, sometimes it was just a little. And thank heavens I got over 65, so I got a break. But even though my taxes went up, I didn't get one thing for it. It all goes to the county or to the school or somewhere else. We don't get it for our city. At least if we vote on this, I can drive down the road and actually see that that money is being spent in Ivanhoe, not somewhere else. That's the main reason that I'm for it, because at least on a bond issue, the money will be spent right here. It's not going to be spent in Woodville. It's not going to be spent down in Comasil or some other place. It's going to be right here. And so I'm willing to wait for the bond or the grant money, and then if we get it all, our street's going to get worked on too. So that's okay. So, but we don't have a chance to have the rest of the streets worked on if we don't get the bond issue passed. So I'm for it.
One more thing before I hand the microphone back over to the mayor. I'm going to go out, put myself way out there again. If you have a pen and paper and you have a question later, call me. My phone number, my cell phone is 936-558-3466. I'll field any question that you have. If I don't have the answer, I'll see what I can do to dig it up and get back to you. But my job as a member of council is to educate and inform and do the best that I can to fill you in on the information that you're looking for. So please call if you have any questions. Thank you all for attending today. I'm going to give it back to the mayor.
I really want to thank David, because I think he did a phenomenal job. He has put so much work into this, and of course LJA Engineering for our consultant, and Lance and his firm for the legal, and the Gillies for what they've done. And I thank Commissioner Nash for being here today. Thank you, Martin. Are there any other comments at all from the audience? I really want to thank everybody for coming here. And if there's nothing else, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Lloyd,
Oh, wait.
Wasn't the commissioner going to tell us about this unincorporating?
Oh, well, I think I read his letter. I mean, were there any other comments? I mean, Martin, would you like to make a comment?
I think it's good.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Right from the horse's mouth.
One is the horse's
What's the question again?
Well, what would happen unincorporating, if it's possible, or
if you unincorporate it, you go back to a private subdivision, and we're not allowed to do work, spend county funds in a private subdivision. It's just illegal. Now, there's a way to incorporate roads, but as was in the letter, you'd have to bring them up to specifications. It would just be almost impossible. I've been commissioner for 14 years, and I've dealt with this issue. Not just with Ivanhoe. I got Wildwood. Got the same issue down there. They're a private community, and it's just the way it is. I'm not going to argue with you whether it's fair or not. I'm not, but it's the law, and we know how the law is sometimes. I'm personally trying to stay out of jail. But, y'all got a real decision to make, but I'll be honest with you, I'm gonna put myself out here. I was very much for when y'all incorporated, because I could see no other way that y'all could generate the funds to have roads in here. You look at Whitetail Ridge, anybody who wants to go look at what happens again if you do not find a way to enhance your roads. Go out there, Whitetail Ridge, and take a look at your future, and it's not good. It's not good. Make a long story short, you're going to have to pay for the roads. If you're going to have roads in here, you're going to have to pay for them. And I wish I could do it. I wouldn't. I mean, for me taking, I got 128 miles of roads. What I got. My budget is $700,000 a year, so I know where y'all are at. Basically, my budget, I have just enough money to patch. That's about it. And you know, good luck. I mean, y'all gotta make a decision. I thought that you did a good job on your presentation. Nobody wants to pay taxes. I sure don't. But luckily I'm 65 too. Anyway, does anybody have any more questions for me? I mean, I know I've worked hard to keep the back road open. We actually got a grant so that we could keep, and that's how I got the grant. I claimed that was y'all's way out in emergency. So we're able to.
But that road was flooded.
Well, I can't do nothing about that.
During the hurricane, right?
Yeah.
They get out of there.
Yeah, we were stranded out here. Toller Road flooded.
Toller Road flooded.
That's what he's talking
We're
about.
flooded.
And the other back side of the pipeline is flooded. So there's nothing you can do about all that.
Anyway, that's what I have to say. I wish there was something I could do to help you folks, but you know, the private subdivision, we're just not allowed to deal with it.
There's one thing you brought to mind. We were in a meeting about Harvey stuff, you know, and Speedy and I have gone to every meeting trying to figure out what Ivanhoe can get out of the funding that's available. And it was the 7 county judges that were affected. And that passed 7 counties, and we got invited to that meeting. We were there, and the judge from Polk County commented that there was a subdivision there on Lake Livingston, a very similar situation. She said, you know, their homes have been repaired with the damage they had from their homes, but she said these people have an annual maintenance fee of $10 a year, and they have ruts in their roads 4 feet deep. And there's no way that we can help them. And you know, Josh looked at us and we looked at each other, and it's like, that would have been Ivanhoe if we had not incorporated. The difference between them and us is we saw the writing on the wall. $6 a year ain't going to do it. We had to incorporate, and we did it. And we're taking charge of our community, and this is part of it. Thank you all. Thank you, Mark.
If y'all ever have any questions or answers, give me a call.
Okay, now, any other comments? Motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Thank you all.
Good job, Danny.